before start, let's come to the tablet, let's plan out and see everything that we need to do and everything that we need to take into account for in the end to have a proper result. So first things first is that we are going to have our 3D scene inside Blender, okay? That's pretty straightforward, you know how to do it already. And then we are going to bring the objects that we are going to be putting fire on top, creating our composite, to Embergen. So here, just fire, we're going to be bringing that to Embergen, okay. And for this to happen, we are going to be exporting between Embergen and Blender and FBX with the camera and the object, because we want to maintain the camera following the object with the animation that we created inside Blender. And from Blender, we are going to export also a EXR file that is going to be our final scene, okay? And then from Embergen, also an EXR multi-layer that we are going to be compositing on top of the final layer. And then, of course, we are going to bring those two together on After Effects and do the final compositing. So a few things that we need to take into account. First is that we need to bake our animation of the camera and the object inside Blender. So we are going to be exporting in FBX, okay? We need to match the resolution between both softwares, Embergen and Blender. We also need to match the FPS, not exactly match, but match in terms of the amount of frames that we are going to have on Embergen, because the simulation on Embergen we are going to be doing at 60 frames per second, and on Blender we are going to be using 24 frames per second, 22.98 or 30, depends on whatever you prefer to use. And then finally, we also need to match the lighting between both. Okay, so those are the 4 things that we need to take into account now to have a successful composite in the end. So now let's jump to the computer and see how we do that. So now that we understand the things that we need to do in order to bring our model to Embergen, let's just take a quick look here on Blender on the steps that we are going to take. So first, I just have a regular scene here. Okay, I'm using a few add-ons, but you can just follow up with vanilla Blender. So this is my camera. I created a really simple animation here. I'm gonna show you. Timeline. Then select my camera. So here's how it starts. Here is how it ends. Why there's movement? Of course, because this is the, let's say, hardest part to do that we need to match on Embergen and then on After Effects. So a few things that we need to take into account. Take some notes, or if you can have both Embergen and Blender open at the same time, don't worry so much about that. But resolution, so what is the resolution that we have, and what is the frame rate? I will push to 24 here just because it bugs a little bit when it's 2348 on Embergen. So yeah, it's better to just push 24 and then the amount of, let's say, the frame range that we have here. For the tree that we are going to be putting on fire inside Embergen, I don't want to put in fire the whole thing. I just want a few places to emit the fire. So what I need to do is come here to Vertex Paint. I'm gonna actually show you this one first, and then you need to come here towards the solid view, and you can see how it's looking. Actually, let me push this back to the sRGB so you can see properly. So you see that it's black with these red things. So for some reason on Embergen, whenever it's white with red, it doesn't work that well, at least for me in the version that I'm using. So usually when you bring an asset, let me just quickly add another tree here from Botanic. So spawn asset, let's choose this one. Let's add it here. What will happen is that it will come out white. So basically what I do is I come here, I actually push my value all the way to 0, and then I make my brush bigger, and then I paint black everywhere. Just go like this, paint here, paint, paint. Make sure that everything's black. And now we come here and we go to RGB, we push red. We need to do this, it needs to be 1, okay? It can be either red or green or blue, but it needs to be just 1 and full opacity. then radius down, and let's say that I just want to burn the top leaves here, so I'll just paint red the areas that I want to burn. Just to make sure that everything is working correctly. Also, when I bring to Embergen, I like to just rename here my color attributes to Embergen, let's say. And also I want, in this case, because I'm bringing from the add-on, I want to convert to editable, just to make sure it's going to work properly. Okay, so now we have what we need in terms of my model is ready. So my model is ready to be pushed to Embergen, and also my camera is ready. So now what I need to do is actually select. Oh, one more thing is that also in terms of lighting, how we are going to be doing this. So I have here, I'm using the Pure Sky Pro, but you can use, let's say, Nishita Sky would be something similar. What I would do is I will come here to my sun, and then I will choose to use horizontal coordinates, and I'll choose the azimuth and the elevation, because I'm going to use that also on Embergen to match how my light is shining here. So I don't need to guesswork, or I don't need to do by eye. I'll just copy this and push to Embergen, and everything will be straight and good to go. So that's basically it that you need for Blender. So now I'm going to choose the tree that I'm exporting. Let's just put as an example that I'm exporting this one again, the camera, control both, and then I'll come here, export FBX, and then you can pause now the video and just copy basically selected objects and all the object types, all local, -E forward, Y up, apply unit, use space transform, and bake animation. Okay, just copy that and you should be good to go. Now we are here on Embergen, and let's quickly go over it. You can just use one of the presets that they are now selling that tends to be quite realistic. In this case, I'm just going to use one of the presets that comes with Embergen, which is this fire cube. Okay, so how do we start? Here I'm just going to delete this. Delete, delete, and delete. Press R space to stop my animation. Then emitter I'll push here and I'll choose import, and then I'm going to bring my FBX. My FBX is here. I'm going to click scale and center to fit. And there you go, it's already in the inside. Sometimes you need to tweak a little bit the scale because the fire will not completely align or match the scale. So in this case, you see that it does align, it does look all right. So press space again. Now, what I'm going to do here, a few things that we need to do. First, let's set up our camera, first thing, and also how we're going to be outputting this. So on the camera, I'm gonna come here, select projection, yes, perspective, that's fine. And I'm going to use the UHD. It's a preset that I created, which is what I told you on Blender to copy the resolution. So you just add it here. In terms of the FPS, it's going to be the original, so 23.96. In this case, it's just the previous FPS that I had before the one that I recorded for you, but it's going to work the same. Then you come here on render, you're going to be choosing the sequence instead of flipbook, and then again, choose your preset or just put the numbers like I did. And here you can see the size of the animation here, and this is 225 frames. Why is that? I'm going to explain a little bit, but basically on Embergen, the FPS is based on the simulation, and here on the simulation, we have time control, and here we can consider as our frame rate. Okay, so here is at 60 FPS that we are going to be using. I think this is also the best way for you to render here on Embergen and use in your software. Then you just need to adapt a little bit on After Effects, but it's going to give you the more smooth and better results. So now let's just take a look at our camera, see if everything came correctly, and you see it is correctly, it is the way we want. So before we tweak everything and add the vertex color, there's another things that I want to make sure that I have. So first one, it is that here on render settings, I want to have a holdout for my shapes rendering. So let's come here on render and you see what that means. Alpha shapes. This is going to use the alpha shape to create a holdout in between the fire so we can match them on After Effects with the footage that I'm going to be rendering from Blender. And also I want to have my export in EXR. So here instead of PNG, I'm going to use EXR and multi-layers. And I like to also add new captures here. I like to add the emissive plus scattering. Also like to add the smoke. And then finally, I can also add the alpha shapes if I want to use as mask for my render or for other things. Okay, so in terms of the fire, I imported here my tree because I use the preset. It's basically already set up for me, so I don't need to work too much on Embergen. I would say my knowledge on Embergen is not that great. I can tweak a little bit, but to create really realistic fire, it's not really my thing. And how now we implement the mask that we created on Embergen. Basically, we just come here, mask 1, select the tree, and we choose vertex color red, R to reinitiate, and of course, we need to use the mask 1 as our source instead of geometry. Double click, remove the geometry. Now R, and there it is. Our fire is just using the vertex that we created. For this specific preset, we also have this collider here. Let me just show you what this can potentially do. So visuals, show collider. Then I'll bring, oh, sorry, I'm missing a shape here. Shape primitive. So here we have our primitive, and then I can create the radius up, and then I can play around, create some animations here, and have the fire reacting to my shape. In this case now, what I would just need to do, let me just remove, I don't want to show the collider. And then we go come here to camera, we go to the render view. You can see how our render would look like. Okay, and just the render with the holdout looks really, really nice. So I would just have to now export, which I'll just come here on render and I'll click export here, and then I'll have it, my render coming to my final directory. So now let's take a final look on After Effects. And now we are here at our final stage where I'm going to show you how we composite everything together. I'm basically just going to show you the basics of what I'm using. So if you do want a more detailed breakdown of this, please let me know and I'll make sure to do that for you. So I will import here all the EXR, so the one from Blender and the one from Embergen. You see that from Embergen is 0 to 224 and from Ember's 1 to 90. And of course, this is because we are bringing a 60 FPS from Embergen and 24 frames per second from Blender. Okay, so here's our footage. I already used the extractor. I did a bit of hue saturation, and we are seeing the linear footage here in our timeline, but let's push for sRGB to see properly. Then I have my Embergen fire on top. So basically also just the same thing, just the extractor, regular things. Then I have my smoke, which I just duplicated my fire and changed here towards smoke. Basically here is just add a little bit of this smoke on top because I thought it was a bit too soft in the sky, so I added here. Sorry, I deleted my smoke. I'll try to come back. Yeah, so there you go, my smoke. And then on top of that, I have a glow, which is using a preset. So I'm using tint curves, 2 times the regular, actually 3 times the regular glow, and a bit of hue saturation. But let me just show you what it does to the image. So you create this stronger glow, adding add on top of it. So this is how it will be with normal. And I'm adding here with add, and I'm using here the extractor, the emissive plus scattering. So also one of the reasons why I bring this one. Then a second glow on top of it is just a duplicate of this first glow, changing in the end to add a, let me show you here, a blur. So here fast blur, and then it creates the glow alongside everything. And then I have on top of it a color adjustment layer where I'm pushing. Now I can just remove this. I'm baking in from linear to sRGB to my footage because I want to use this directly on YouTube. Then on top of it, I'm using a exposure node and then adding some grain on top of it. So see here the final result. And then finally, I have one solid layer where I pushed a preset that I downloaded. I'm going to put the link of this preset also in the description. It's from another video here on YouTube, where I created this map layer, and on top of it, I create this heat wave on top. just to finalize my effect. So a few things that you need to take into account. First is that the file that you are bringing from Embergen is at 60 FPS, so you need to adapt to your comp. So for example, my final comp here, fire, is at 24 FPS. So because this is 60, this adapts to 24, and then it matches the size that is coming out of Blender. And then after we do all of this and composite all the layers together, so we have a really nice result. So that's it. Let me know if you have any questions or if you want any of this step in more detail, and I'll be happy to help you. So see you in the next one.